This is the Barak Lurie Moment, brought to you by the Glazov gang. What's the most destructive force in our civilization today?
Disease, I'd imagine, but from the fact that you've named your video Atheism Kills, I'm sure you disagree.
Is it radical Islam? Is it poverty? Is it hunger? Is it global warming? I put it to you that despite the fact that these things can be dangerous and issues to be concerned about, that the greatest destructive force in our civilization today is godlessness.
Great then, and I hope you're about to follow this accusation with sufficient evidence to support said claim, and I'm not talking about making further watery claims that have zero demonstrable merit. I mean actual evidence.
As I say in my book, Atheism Kills, the fact of atheism is the greatest overarching force that is so destructive.
You've already gone from positing something to it already being a fact as if it's not doubted, something I find very problematic.
Contrary to the mantra that you've heard over and over again in college, that religion has killed far more than anything else, the exact opposite is true. How do we know this? We know this from the fact that history shows us. Fascism, communism, eugenics, progressivism, slavery, abortion, these are things that have risen from godlessness, from atheism.
Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. End quote. Leviticus chapter 55 verses 44 through 46. This is the Bible not simply allowing for but forwarding chattel slavery, i.e. the ownership of fellow human beings as full property who can be inherited. This was so clear, in fact, that it was the Bible that slave owners flocked to as an attempt to pacify the African slaves brought over to the States, as seen in the vulgar sermon titled The Religious Instruction of the Negroes, which was published in written form after popular demand from Christians. Then, of course, we have genocide utilized repeatedly throughout the Bible, not only by God himself as seen in Genesis, but called upon by him as seen with the Midianites in Numbers chapter 31. So clear was the intention behind this, as is written, that when a group of the fighting soldiers brought back slaves to Moses, the same Moses who was acting as the mouth of God at that point, they stated, "Have you allowed all the women to live?" he asked them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in the Pierre incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has ever slept with a man. But save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. End quote. So not only do we have genocide, remembering that the Hebrews only saw the male descendants as hereditary, hence the minor difference in what we've come to know as genocide today, but we also have the allowance of mass rape given to the soldiers of God on behalf of Moses, who at no point is reprimanded by God. Now you're the one who needs to connect Stalinism, fascism, and eugenics to so-called atheism, as currently that's just pure bollocks in need of actual argument.
It not only has killed approximately 200 million people in the 20th century alone, and still is killing people. That's bad enough. It's also led to the horrific rapes and tortures and enslavement of people for millennia.
Your evidence for this is what exactly? Christian Nazi Germany? The way that Stalin and communism reformed the Russian Orthodox Church? The way that the Bible was used to uphold centuries of slavery and colonial atrocity? At which point does Christianity's horrific nature become the fault of people who do not believe in your bullshit? I have to ask, as someone who's guided by evidence, I'm having a real big problem seeing it.
This is a big problem that we must deal with. But atheism doesn't stop there.
The problem is not that it doesn't stop there, it's the fact that so far you've done fuck all to demonstrate that it even starts there. That's the problem.
It also kills so many other things. It kills from the outside, yes, but it also kills us from within. What do I mean by that? I mean that it kills our sense of hope, our sense of love, beauty, passion, purpose. It even kills our sense of free will and civilization itself.
Fact, society is becoming less violent and more civil as religious thought decreases. Fact, countries with the highest populations of non-believers, such as Sweden, are not post-apocalyptic hellholes. Fact, the non-believers are proportionally underrepresented inside a prison. Those are facts. What you're asserting is your unfounded opinions that are demonstrably hollow. As a species, we're not just good without God. We seem to be better.
Think for a moment about the churches that were built so long ago. It would take 700 years to build a beautiful church. So, for example, my favorite one in Toledo, in Spain. 700 years. What did that mean? It meant that the people who started building it knew that they would never see the end of it. And not only that, but 10 generations hence knew they would never see the end of the building of that church. Can you imagine having that today? You'd go to the city of Santa Monica or Los Angeles and say, I'd like to build a church, and I anticipate it'll take about 700 years. Or you'd be laughed out. The reason why is that we don't have a sense of the past or the future, which is another thing that atheism tends to kill.
Completely false. I just have higher priorities than building an over-expensive building to glorify some unproven entity. I'm a humanist. I work for a world of education, reason and compassion which lacks hunger, cruelty and superstition. I will likely never see such a world, being only offered glimpses here and there of what could be one day. I see helping humanity as more important than feeding the ego of some non-existent deity. If your idea of meaning and wonder is giving some non-existent entity a imaginary blowjob, then by all means do your thing. It's just, that's not my kink.
We can't have meaning in our lives without some sort of structure that gives us a sense of purpose. And we're seeing this all the time.
But I have meaning, as I just noted, so what you are talking about has nothing to do with reality, that's for sure. Again, places like Sweden aren't some sort of uber-nihilistic dystopia. I'm seeing a whole lot of assertion and no actual evidence on your part.
Look, you don't have to, you can believe whatever you want. Anything that you want, it's a free country after all. But one thing you have to acknowledge is that all governments that were governed by a sense of godlessness were horrific in nature. The Soviet Union alone was responsible for approximately 60 to 70 million people.
You mean the same Soviet Union that reformed the Russian Orthodox Church to justify its atrocities? That Soviet Union that utilized Christianity to pacify its citizens into accepting the atrocities you highlighted because Stalin was divinely ordained and therefore unquestionable. Tell me again how the Soviet Union utilizing theistic religions to get the everyday person to fall into line is an example of how the absence of theistic belief leads to atrocity. Also, I'm a humanist, not a Stalinist. I don't think you as a Christian would like me charging you with the crimes of, say, Islam or Hinduism. I mean, you're all theisms, right? But no, I doubt you would like that. So why then do you charge all atheists, including myself as a philosophical humanist who completely falsifies every single one of your assertions so far with the political doctrine of Stalinism? Just think about it for a second, or more if you can actually handle it, because I'm not so certain you can.
Mao was responsible for the deaths of 40 to 70 million people.
Oh, you mean Mao who deified himself as a religion? You see, while Stalin took the approach of authenticating himself via the pre-existing religions, most Eastern attempts at communism have deified their leaders. It may not be classical monotheism, but it's a theism nonetheless, so tell me again how a theistic system of belief is an example of how an absence of theistic belief leads to atrocity. Do tell.
And on it went with Che Guevara, with Ceausescu, Ho Chi Minh, Kim Jong-un and his father and his grandfather. These were all monsters that subscribed to one thing as the core of their philosophies. What was it, you ask? Atheism. A world without God.
Citation needed. You see, you go beyond the suggestion that some of these people, such as Stalin, may have been atheist. You see, sadly unlike Hitler, who declared their Christian faith in private meetings with his inner circle so we can be pretty certain as to their belief, we don't have much evidence as to these other people's beliefs. And yet you proclaim an absence of theistic belief to be central to their doctrine. I ask you to simply provide evidence of that claim.
They were avowed atheists. And before you start saying, well, wait a minute, Hitler was a Christian, look again. Hitler, in fact, was an atheist. At best, a pantheist who believed somehow in the gods of nature. But I want you to understand one thing about Hitler. He hated Christianity. He not only hated Judaism, he hated Christianity. He had written a tremendous amount of books about the matter and speeches about it, saying how he hated Christianity. Don't think for a moment that he is some sort of exception to this rule.
I have never found pleasure in maltreating others, even if I know it isn't possible to maintain oneself in the world without force. Life is granted only to those who fight the hardest. It is the law of life. Defend yourselves. The time in which we live has the appearance of the collapse of this idea. It can still take 100 or 200 years. I am sorry that, like Moses, I can only see the promised land from a distance. End quote. These are the minutes of a private meeting with just Hitler's inner circle. There is no political gain here in declaring his Christian faith as being so strong that he saw himself as analogous to Moses, who, as noted earlier, also carries out routine genocide in the Old Testament. Note how I supply actual evidence in support of my position, whilst you simply tell your viewers to accept your statements as fact on your word alone.
Wherever godlessness rules, horrific things happened, and there's never been an exception. Never.
Except, yes, there is. There are numerous examples, such as Sweden, along with the majority of Scandinavia, large parts of Central and Western Europe, and Japan. But I will note, being secular does not intrinsically make a nation a decent one. The US, whilst founded on secular principles, was still caught up in Christian-supported slavery, misogyny, and any number of vile things. It's taken time to decrease these issues, and waves of Christian revivalism has set progress back repeatedly throughout history. Secularism is certainly a requirement for a just society, but it's not the only thing, the sole thing, required.
Now, you may say, well, what about the Inquisition? What about the Crusades? What about the Salem witch trials? I go through that in my book, Atheism Kills, and describe in my chapter, Murder by the Numbers, where I show very clearly that whatever mistakes and missteps the church has taken in the past, whether the Inquisition or otherwise, it pales in comparison. It is but a drop in the ocean, as they say, compared to what atheism has wrought. Don't play that game of atheism. Do not think for a moment that religion is somehow a scourge on the earth. It is not so. It is a blessing to the earth.
From what you've just stated, I can gather that you're talking raw numbers, not the more accurate comparison which takes into account global population. When we take into account just global population, ignoring the advancements in tools of war such as weaponry and motorized transport that offers nations ranges they once lacked, we just take into account the global population and we already find that we as a species are becoming less violent. So even if we were to pretend that Stalin hadn't reformed the Russian Orthodox Church, that people such as Mao hadn't deified themselves, and that Hitler wasn't a devout Christian as he clearly was, even if we pretend that, when you consider the world population, their crimes pale in comparison to what Christianity has done, acts, by the way, which are completely aligned with the Christian Bible. A good place to start is with the 9 million natives massacred by Christian settlers in what is now known as the United States of America, an act repeatedly justified on the basis that it was a God-given right to remove the heathens from their land in order to give it to God's chosen people.
Remember that the Catholic Church and Christianity and Judaism gave us the following. It gave us the university.
And secular thought gave us the contemporary university, i.e. the educational establishment beyond the theological cesspool you are on about.
It gave us a justice system.
But since we've gone ahead and outlawed religiously ordained slavery, genocide, and begun to see women as equals rather than property, we can safely say that secular justice has saved us from the so-called religious justice.
It gave us our public school system as we think about it.
Which one? The one that refuses to teach science because it goes against biblical teachings, or the one which actually teaches its students? Also, there's a reason so many Christians are pulling their kids out of public education to homeschool. Every improvement on that public school system has moved it away from any connection to religion it may have had thrust upon it.
It gave us hospitals.
No, that's just flat out false. Medical establishments predate your religions. They were often hindered by religion, and when religion has a say in medicine, everyone suffers.
It gave us a charity system.
Okay, well, now you're just being ridiculous. I mean, sure, it's charity if you call doing good for the intention to convert someone or get brownie points rather than help that person out, charity. But it's certainly not the origin of charity either way. The origin of charity is simply our nature as a species. I mean, we see acts of charity in other species as well. Did your religion go and give it to them? No, it's absolutely ridiculous. You're just claiming nothing that your religion has done nothing but pervert. Charity is about helping people, not getting into heaven.
It gave us the scientific method as we think about it today.
Complete and utter bullshit. Never has a religious scripture forwarded the scientific method, and those people who actually have often did so at the risk of endangering themselves due to religious sensitivity.
So many of the great scientists who discovered all the wonderful things that we now take for granted, including the fact that the earth goes around the sun and the Big Bang, came from deeply religious people.
Many of whom existed at a time where you could be executed for being religious, and out of those that did not, most live in a time where being non-religious was something that often resulted in ostracization and social hostility. I mean, you brought up heliocentrism, which, by the way, was not the work of one person, but we most typically associate it with Galileo, who was punished by the church. Like, did you not think about that before saying it? Who knew that smart people will hide aspects about themselves that will get them killed or punished? Who could have thought? It's almost like being smart makes people more likely to, do the smart thing.
Atheism doesn't nourish that. It does not seek science, contrary to what the atheist will tell you.
Which is why the vast majority of scientists in top positions today are atheists, and those theists who are scientists systematically fail to prove the existence of their God utilizing the method you claim they uphold. These are all the same tight assertions. Next you'll be saying that you were once an atheist.
I know. I was an atheist myself.
Told ya.
When I was an atheist, I noted one thing. I said, I'm an atheist, but thank God nobody else is. It's funny, not once did I ever consider its internal contradiction. But it's true. I was right then. And the facts and history bears it out plainly as day. Do not pursue a world of godlessness. It is a dangerous, horrific, and empty world.
Evidence still needed, as so far you spent 5 minutes asserting your ignorance of history as fact. This seems to be an ever-popular American pastime.
Saying that you're an atheist but you're a good person is like saying you're a communist and you're a good person. It means very little. You have to understand that your belief system, as it is implemented, is very dangerous and horrific.
Sadly for you, all this does is prove that you are a liar when it comes to so-called atheism. Atheism is not a worldview, it's simply the absence of theistic belief. The fact that you don't know this basic fact tells us without a moment of hesitation that you are ill-equipped to talk on any aspect of said term or any related field. If you can't even get the basics right, what hope do you have on the nuanced aspects? You're a joke and nothing more. Well, hello there. I just wanted to say a few things here at the end of the video. First, I'd like to thank everyone who has ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Trevor Matheson, Andrew Spreitzer, Matthew Kovac, John Schoenrock, Alexander Williams, and Daniel Martinez. Your support has ensured this channel its ability to grow over the years, and for that we are truly thankful. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe and follow Essence of Thought on Facebook and YouTube. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, an organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Lastly, I'd like to request that you treat the people responded to in the video with a reasonable degree of respect. Whilst we understand that there are justifiable limits to respect when tackling certain heavy topics, and anger can be a very genuine emotion in tackling injustice, any comments utilising language which hurts others on the basis of their perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity and ability, both physical and mental, will be removed immediately, and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's keep this space a humanist space for everyone. Thank you.